Meet me on the softer side. Meet me on the softer side. Softer side of your heart.
Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. You can find out about this and all of our other author events at www.skylightbooks.com, where you can also browse our inventory as well as order books online. You can also follow us on Twitter or even be our friend at facebook.com. If you'd like to talk to a real person, we can be reached at 323-660-1175. And don't forget, Skylight Books depends on listeners like you to help support us. So whether you're in our neighborhood or browsing online, buy a book or two to help ensure that we'll be around for a long, long time. Thanks and enjoy.
I didn't change my watch. I was all confused with the time. Excuse me again. I think I watched 50 times the times. I'm very nervous about these things, but I don't know. So I'm going to go right through. So what I want to do today is talk about, well, my last book, which is the fourth of my books that talks about traveling. I've done more books than that, but since I come from this one, I'm just going to focus on these one. These are more or less the books that I've worked on, but I have four. I've worked on traveling, the traveling one they call, and they call it graphic novel as well, which I'm not too fan about that term, but anyhow, I can explain you later. So I want to go through these four books and show you how I work, and then we'll do and how it has evolved in France as well, because now I'm in France, and how the small press edition has changed throughout the 15-20 years that I've known them in France, and it has changed things, I think, all over the world, and now even here in the States. So I'm going to start quickly with the beginning, and then in three-quarter we're going to go with question, like a quarter after 6, and then we should be finished at 6:30. This is the magazine that existed 15 years ago in France, and I've stopped reading comic books when I was young. Well, not when I was young, I was reading a lot of books when I was younger, but then I worked in animation. I did all of my study in Toronto. I'm Canadian, I'm from French Canada, so you have to excuse me for my broken English. And I did my study of animation. I worked in Montreal, and then the studio collapsed, well, stopped because of economic problem. We were actually working with Yugoslavia, Zagreb studio, and in Zagreb the war just broke loose and all the animators were going to fight. That was very strange because we met them afterwards. They said, well, we went to fight it and we went back to animation. Oh wow, that's strange. And so the studio stopped, and I went just for traveling in Europe with my portfolio, and at the time there was like 50 people working in studios, in lots of studios, so you could go basically around and knock at doors. And I worked in Germany for a year, and then I worked in France, and I stayed actually longer than I thought. And I've stopped reading comics after a while, and then I met a few that publishing house. It was called l'Association, and they were doing that magazine. So I started doing short stories for them, because I didn't really thought that one day I would do books and comics and I would make a living out of that. It's kind of a chance. I thought I would do animation to make a living, and I would do short story with that magazine. So I was trying lots of things, very different from one to the other. And some of these stories, I kind of developed them. Like I did that story of a lady, and it was called Aline, and it looks like that. So it's all very short. It really looks like an animation film. If you look at the one before, you can see the influence I have from animation, because you have, well, this is one page with no movement at all, but this page moves just like a short film basically, and maybe it's too far for the one at the back, but it's like I've done one story. It was called Aline, and then I did another one called started with a B, and then I thought, well, maybe I can do 26 stories like that. So it came out with my first book, who's called Aline and the Others. It's this one, and I'll come back with that later on. And it was just with no text, so it's all just short animation pieces basically, but it's on paper, because when I was working on animation I always thought, oh, maybe we can do story with that. It can move, but just looking at some image with movement, sometimes it's a lot of fun. So I guess that has been a big influence for me. So I was working in animation, and what happened is, just like anywhere in the world, same as the States, it became more and more outsourced, and I was sent over to different countries to direct the animation. So that's me, and that's the rest of the studio in China, because I was sent in China actually 2 times, and that was what I was doing as a living. I did some teaching, I did some video games, because there was less and less studios. So studios with 50 people doesn't exist anymore in France. I don't know about the States, but I know that the Simpsons are all done in South Korea. They even make fun of that in some of their episodes. And what happened is I was in Shenzhen. I spent 3 months there, and I took notes actually, because that was my second time I was in China. And I was thinking, well, this time I'm going to try to take notes, not to forget, because I have a very bad memory, and that's actually one of my main motivation to do not a book like that, but short stories like that, to keep a trace of that, because I forgot almost everything. And then I arrived in China. I said, oh yeah, that's true. I forgot about this and this and this. And I said, well, what's the point of traveling if you forget 5 years afterwards? So I said, this time I'm going to take notes. So I came back in France. I was reading these notes, and I thought, well, maybe some of these small notes could make stories. And then I started in the magazine doing 16 pages. People liked it. And I did another 16 pages. People liked it more. And, someday we said, well, maybe we can do a book with that. So it was not planned to be a book, but it was just a bunch of short stories that finally we decided to put together. I used a technique whose wax pencil. I know it's not very common in France, but I know I saw them in the store down there. It's these wax pencils that are wrapped with paper, and when you want to make them sharper, you just pull the paper. I really like, because they're very strong. But that's a technique I really don't recommend to anyone doing comic books, because it's just for one illustration. It's okay. You can do illustration. Like after that, I've used that technique. Well, I think it was before, just for illustration. It works okay because you have a nice render. You have that texture that looks very nice. But to do a whole comic, it's too much work. And it works well in the winter, but in the summer, it's like drawing with mascara, and it just melts. It's hell. So actually, I stopped in the summer. It was just too complicated. So what happened to me in China, it was basically a bunch of it was just observation. So that's really the way I work. I go around, I look at things and at people, I take notes. And this was in Shenzhen in December 1997. So everything was under construction. I guess it's the same. It has changed in China, maybe not in that sense, but everything was really dirty, I have to say. That's why I used that technique, because I wanted to have something kind of greasy and oily. And yeah, that's the main reason why I used that. But yeah, after a while, I thought it was just too much work. I had to work with a translator. That was my boss, and she was very bad. And it was just really like when I saw the movie Lost in Translation, I felt so in harmony with the main character, because she was saying stuff, and I could see they were fighting with the animators. And then I would say, "Is everything okay?" And she said, yeah, everything's fine, no problem. And everything was so suspicious. So I walked around in the streets. I don't know if you've been in China, but in 1997, being a foreigner, you were not unnoticeable at all. People would see you, and they really look at you frontally. They yell on the phone, in the elevator. So it's just small. I was on my own. And I didn't talk too much about the political aspect of the country, because I done that book 20 years ago, I think. So I was a young man, I was 20-something, and I was not too much into reading stuff about politics. But I know now, if I would go back to China, I would probably talk about the big difference between the people in the mainland and the ones that are in the cities and the ones that are in the countryside, because that's very interesting to see and to notice and to talk about. But this book is more about everyday life. So this is when you go in a restaurant on your own and you try to order, and you have about 15 people to pour you tea, give you cups of this and this, and you have a lot of service, that's for sure. But it's a bit too much, so I didn't like it too much. So for an example, you go to the bank That's the type of little stories that I've put in the book. You go to the bank, you're on the line, and someone's squeezing all the time. That's just the way they do it. Well, I don't judge them. It's just you have to get used to that. You have to be very close to the other person. But even when you're at the counter and you want to talk to the guy, oops, there's someone comes in, and it's even though you have to stay very close to that little window, and then he takes your order, he tosses it back behind. There's people actually sleeps at the bank. They make naps. They don't have problem with that. I think it's very good for health, but it's very surprising for someone coming from Canada to have someone having a nap in a bank. He wakes up and he puts it back, and then she finally gets the money, turn it again. So it's very fun to see. It goes clack, clack, clack from one office to the other. And then he gives back my money from a little candy can that he probably has kept for years and years, and I have my change. And I could see the girl just next to me having that pile of money, and I was afraid because these yens were very big. I have a little pile, but she was like having a huge one, and I thought, well, I don't feel so bad if she walks on the street with that. I guess I can go. So that was my life in China, being a bit lost in translation. And then when I came back, I started to do 16 pages. It became a book, and it was actually quite popular. Not so well. At the time, that's 15 years ago, we did 2,000 copies, and they were sold in the year, so they were actually happy. Because 2,000 at the time in France, it meant that they could reprint it. So it was a good news. So that was one of my first book. And they sent me after that to Vietnam. So I thought, well, that's going to be good because I'm going to do a book about Vietnam. Why not? But what happened in Vietnam, I just had I had my little motorcycle for 2 months, going around in the streets, working in the studio, and actually, I had just a good time. The studio was working fine. People were great. I had just no problem at all. And all I could say was that it was like a happy picnic at the end. So I didn't have much to say apart than I had fun. And I don't know, I don't want to read a book like that. So I'm not going to spend a year and a half to make a book which talks about just a good time in Vietnam. So now I take notes, but I never know if I do a book when I come back, because I read my notes when I come back. And if it's interesting, well then, yeah, I'm going to do a book. Excuse me. So what happened is after that, I've met a lot of people. That was before September 11. That was in 2001. They sent me to North Korea. Well, they asked me to go. I said, yeah, that'd be interesting. Because I've met a lot of people in the animation business who were going to North Korea. And I felt very frustrated because they were always saying, well, it was very boring. There was no bar, no place to go to have a coffee. I stayed in my room and I played video game the whole 2 months. I thought, well, do you imagine you've been in North Korea? That's one of the most remote and closest country in the world. And he says, well, I don't know. It was just boring. So I thought, well, if they ask me, I'm going to try to read as much as I can. And that's what I did. In 2001, there was about like 5 or 6 books you can find on North Korea. It's not like today. And I've read them all, and everybody was talking about 1984 in these books. I said, I've read it when I was younger, but I started to read it again, and I said, well, I'm going to bring it with me, and I'll finish there. Should be fun. So that's the cover of who has been translated, but I'll come back to that after. So they sent me to North Korea, and I was going there in North Korea. That was my first day. I take notes, same thing. I was there for 2 months. So that was before September 11, like I said. And at the time, it was just a strange and forgotten place. It was not like today, the acts of evil, the rogue state, and the bad guy. They were just forgotten. So at the airport, first day, the guy looked for me. There's no light in the airport, so which tells a lot about the electricity situation and that they're facing, because it was all pitch black basically, but it was in daylight, so I could see only silhouette. And a guy came to me, shake my hand, and then there's the driver who gives me flower. And I was briefed before because I knew that these flowers were not meant for me at all. I know what they meant. And I says, thanks, that's very nice. And then we go with the car. And then my translator, no, that was my guide, because for 2 months I was followed by a guy and a translator. Always, all the time. They follow you and they look at what you're doing in case you have trouble. It's just to help you. But of course, you know that they're there because I don't know, they don't want you to go in some place maybe. So he explained me, well, before we go to your hotel, we're going to visit the city. We're going to go to the highest point of Pyongyang, so you can have a nice look at the whole place. Well, I knew that we had actually. I said, yeah, okay, fine, let's go there. But I knew where we were going. We were going to that place where you have the big statue of Kim Jong-il. I think it's very impressive. It's something like 24 meters, 25, 22. It's all in bronze, so when you look at it, you see the feet, and then it goes up, and you have this big face. It's very impressive. And then, of course, these flowers were meant for me to go there and to put the flower on the feet of the statue, and you had to kneel and pay your respect. So as I was paying my respect to the dear leader, since I worked for a company, I didn't care. It was not for me or for a political reason. I didn't care doing that. I was thinking, well, I think there's going to be enough stuff in this country to make a book about that. So that was just my first day. And the rest was just like that. You know, you had these guys following you all the time. I got to see the people at the UN who had cars and who could go around at night time in Pyongyang. So what happened is this book attracted a lot of journalists, but different. Usually I was having only journalists to specialize in comic books, but then I had the journalists who were very interested in politics, in foreign politics, and North Korea is a fantasy for lots of journalists. They dream about being in my situation where I could just walk on the streets and look around. Any journalist who goes there is followed, and he has only 24 hours or a week, but never 2 months like I did, and just walking around and talking with these people. So they were very curious, so I got a lot of attention with that, radio, and different journalists. So it changed a little bit things in France, because now the books were reviewed. Well, this book was reviewed in foreign policy journal and stuff like that. So it changed a little bit things. So I think we sold the first year something like 10 or 15,000. So it was no, I think it was 6. Yeah, sorry, it was more 6. Then they reprinted it. So from 2 to 6,000, it was great. And more people were doing graphic novels. Of course, there was Marjane Satrapi, who did Persepolis. That was such a big hit that people were, looking more at that. And I always have people when I do signings that say, I don't read comic books, but I've had someone who gave me your book, and now I'm discovering that there's all sorts of graphic novels that are interesting. So I've had these type of people for 15 years, 20 years now, and now there's actually a lot of people, and which is good, because just like them, I've started reading comic books at one point, because the same graphic 46 page in color didn't really interest me, and all I could find was fantasy or science fiction stories. And after a while, I met these guys who were doing stories for people of my age. So I thought, well, that's interesting. They talk about different stuff, and we could try lots of things, going in doing observation or journalism. I don't really feel I do journalism. When I do these type of books, I really have the feeling that I'm doing postcards. That's it. I'm just reading my notes, and I do whatever I think it's going to be interesting, funny, and for me, they're long, big postcards that I would send to my family. So I want to show you just this for fun. And the book got a lot of attention, and it was translated, so that was very, very good for me. I got as far as translation, I got 12 or 13 translation, and some of them are quite funny, because I know for some reason they change covers. So that's the Japanese cover. It's very colorful, and I'm talking about a not so funny country, so I wanted to have a kind of a gray color, but this is not gray at all. And there's my name here, and then there's the name of, I think that's the translator, but I have no idea. I don't know why he's on the cover. And they took image of me and of the people, but they've removed the text. And I don't know, but for anyone who works in image or graphic, this means basically that I have nothing to say, or I'm talking for nothing. So it just doesn't make sense. But for some reason they don't tell us. You just translate the book, and that's it. That's what you have. And the Brazilian version is very colorful. It looks like I'm going to the carnival, basically. But it's North Korea. I was saying to them, it's not Rio. They said, well, but we need a lot of color, which is not true, because I went to Rio once, and there's all sorts of covers. Some are very sober. I don't know why they changed it. And to tell you a bit of the way that comic book is seen throughout Europe and most of the world, actually. This is the Norwegian one, and I said, why did you change the cover? I really like mine. I've spent time to do it, and I thought it's a good cover. And they said, well, we changed it because we don't want the people to think that it's a comic book. So I said, well, it's a comic book, and I don't have no problem with that. Actually, when they're going to open it, they're going to say, oh, it's a comic book. So that's what she said, the Norwegian translator there. I thought that was interesting, because it's a bit like that throughout most of the countries. They like these comics. They know it's for adults, but they're afraid that the word comic book is going to frighten them. So I was sent to. I was not sent to Burma, actually. What happened is I stopped doing animation, and I started to do more of comic book, and I was hired by a bigger company in France. It's called Dargaud, and I thought, well, maybe I can make a living with these comics. They are more classic stuff. They're more like Belgium. It's a detective story. It was a funny way of telling stories for detectives, and I thought, okay, I'm going to make a living with that, and I'm going to do one of these books that I still do just for fun. But what happened is the exact opposite. The stuff at Dargaud didn't work at all. We stopped the series, and the book I was doing just for fun worked actually quite well. The Pyongyang was still selling, and I think we sold the second year 15,000, so it was going good. And what happened with the big house is they said, why don't you do another book like Pyongyang, but with us this time? So things have changed a lot, because I remember if I would have seen a big publishing house 15 years ago, they would have said to me, well, we don't do small books, we don't do black and white, and the story about a guy who walks around in China, that doesn't really, not going to interest the people we have here who reads our book. So things have changed a lot. And here I was in Burma, and for us Burma was a different experience, because I thought, well, now that I don't do comics, I'm just going to stay fixed in France and do my stuff here. But my wife said, I must be born under the star of traveling, because my wife said, well, now that you do comics, maybe you can come with me, because she works in NGOs. She works with Doctor Without Border, and she said, maybe I can do a long mission, like a 1-year mission, and you come with me and you can work whatever you do on piece of paper. I said, yeah, sure, why not? So we were in Burma for a year. And the book is a bit bigger, because I had to talk about more stuff. My little life, the life with expatriates people, the people that I've met in Burma. So it became a bigger book, and what I do is the same. I like, after Pyongyang, which I had to talk about the situation, because if I talked about Pyongyang and I just repeat the words that these translator and guide has told me, it would have been too weird, because they were saying always the basic propaganda stuff. So I had to know what happened before and behind the curtain, kind of. And when I was asking these translator what's going on with this, with the Sholima and the Juche, what is that? Well, they would answer, but always in a biased way. I knew it, because I knew a bit more. So I had to put a little more information in Pyongyang that I've done in Shenzhen. And actually, I really like the mix of having information. Comic books is very entertaining, but you can actually say a lot of things in a comic book, and it doesn't look like it's too serious, because it's always on a kind of a fun and entertaining way. And this is an example, because I was walking around with my son, and then the guy we were at in the MSF program mission told us, did you go see Aung San Suu Kyi? She lives just next door. She's a neighbor, actually. So I said, oh, wow, I didn't know that. So I said, maybe I can go there with my son, because my son was 1 year and a half, and everybody in the neighborhood knew him, because he was super popular. My my watchman was walking around with him, and people knew him much more than me because they're very like babies there in Burma. The father, they're always wanted to have Louis in their arms. I think it's because they don't have strollers, and when they go see friends, they walk for miles, and it's actually the father who carry the babies. So the father is always very close to the small babies, and it's a very baby-oriented kind of country, and it's a lot of fun to be there with a baby. It opened a lot of doors to me. I've been able to visit neighbors that would have never seen before because I was going around with my baby. So I thought maybe the same thing's going to happen if I try to go to Aung San Suu Kyi's house. There was a checkpoint. Nobody could go. That's what my friend told me. But I said, well, if I just walk with my baby, maybe that's going to work. So here I go. I said, well, let's try that. They're not going to stop me with a baby. So I go in the traffic. It's very bad because actually everybody's stopped there. So I go in front. I see the watchman and I try to talk, but of course I don't. I pretend I don't really understand, and I try to go. It doesn't work. He tries to stop me, but I kind of say, "Well, sorry, I don't understand," and try to go at the same time. And then I explain what she represents, Aung San Suu Kyi. She's just in the house one block further, and for me it's a good time to give the information because I know that the reader is going to think, well, what is she doing basically? She was staying in her house, but for a lot of people that I've met afterwards, they didn't know that she was in that house, but she was not prisoner. Like she could just go and take a plane and go back to England. That's where she's from. Well, she was an English citizen. She's still, but she couldn't come back. That was the problem. That's why she was fighting for us. She said, I'm not going to leave the people and leave them to you guys, dictators. I'm going to stay with them. So she stayed like that for 15 years. And so, yeah, in a comic book, you can explain little things like that. And people get to learn a lot of things. Turning page and reading, and after that, boom, I go back to my situation, and I get that watchman who says, well, because I was trying to go, he says, well, wait a second, are you a foreigner? And I look at him and I said, well, yeah, I am. What do you think? And he says, well, you can go then, that's it. So, you can't. Okay. So that was it. I couldn't go. I said, oh, it's too bad. And then I think, oh, maybe I should do something. Maybe I could go tomorrow again, and maybe I can go every day. And I would be, every day I would try to go. They would stop me and people would start to talk about me. That type of Gandhi way of forcing things. But then this is just in my thoughts. And then I said, yeah, okay, let's do that. Tomorrow I'm going again, and I'll be that foreigner who goes, for a year, try to see Aung San Suu Kyi. But then the next day, well, I forgot about that, and I'm washing my baby, and that was it. And that's what I like about doing comics and being able to draw myself is compared to an article or a journalist who talks to you and gives you information, you don't see the guy, you don't really know what kind of guy he is. When you do something like that, and I draw myself, the reader knows, okay, I'm not a specialist about Burma or the Middle East, I'm not a journalist. I'm just a guy who's going to come with his wife and try to understand what's going on in that country for a year and try to see how the Burma behave and the people. So he knows where the information comes from. And for me, that's very important. That's very honest. Yeah, and I like that. I like to depict that. Come of course, one day I think I'm going to be a hero, and the next day, well, okay, let's do something else because that's never going to work. So I like to do autobiography for that, and for other reasons because you get to use the humor you want, and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, maybe it's time to jump to Jerusalem. And maybe I want to see this in Burma. Yeah, the way I work is whenever I go in China, Pyongyang, I try to discover what's going on with the comics there. And I've met a few cartoon in Burma because I thought, Burma, that there's going to be no newspaper, no magazine. But there's actually 80 magazines every month published. They don't talk about politics, of course. They talk about sports, poetry, literature, lots of things. And there's actually a lot of people doing cartoon there. And they're quite good. Look at this one. They're not politics, but sometimes they really look like politics. Like this one, for instance. It could be a metaphor. Or this one is really look like a metaphor. So you get to see that in newspaper there, and some are really brilliant. I've put a few of these guys on my website because I thought they're really well done. This one maybe is too far. This one's just funny. So I always try to go and see what's going on with the comic book scene in the country. And yeah, just for fun, I want to show you in China is the same, because I was going around and I found a very funny one. There's this one, that's on the street. You get to see these small, I don't know if it's still like that, but you would get to see people selling these very, very small books for a few yuan. And this is actually quite funny because it's a Sherlock Holmes story. So you have a Chinese version or influence over Sherlock Holmes, and you look at the way the composition is done. That's very Oriental as a composition, and at some point you even have look at the carpet. I don't think Sherlock Holmes has a carpet like that in his house, and look at the bed. I don't think Sherlock Holmes has a bed like that in his house with long draperies and all that. So I thought it was fantastic. Yeah. So yeah, I like to go in countries, and then with the Burmese people, I was lucky enough to meet a few of these artists in Burma who were doing a cartoon, and some of them I've teach them animation, and I've been I've been there to show them animation, and they showed me one day they were giving kind of a reunion of illustrators, and they met all together, and the oldest comic book guy, they give them money so he was in a wheelchair having a bad time, so they always do that for their old teacher, for their old people. So I was lucky enough to be in one of these conventions. There was actually 150 comic book people. I was surprised. That's Burma. You think, nobody does comic there. But yeah, they do actually. So it was fun to discover that at the same time. That's the way I work a little bit. Sometimes I take pictures and I transform them. I have a few examples. That's in Bangkok. So I took a picture because we spent the weekend in Bangkok from Rangoon. It's very close. And I just transformed that. I was in my friend's house. He showed me something on his computer. But they only have 2 hours of electricity, so it was a very short session on front of the computer. And after that, he said he was living in this house. It's all very run down, and so we had 2 hours of electricity, and then that was it. That's all they had for the day. So it was interesting to see that, because of course, in the area where we were and most of the expats were, it was much more comfortable. We had electricity almost all day, not all the time, but much more comfortable. And one thing I remember, when we went down the staircase, because I think he was living on the 10th floor, on the 7th floor, it was pitch dark because there was no electricity. So he was in front of me, and he was saying, "Oh, there's 7 steps for this one." So I was counting 7. It was 8, 8, 8, and at the end it was 9. I said, "Oh, the last one is 9. Why?" And he says, "Because every house in Burma, it has to be an odd number for stairs." I thought it was very interesting. That's the type of thing. I go home, I take notes. I don't have the answer. I think a journalist wouldn't do a story with that, because he doesn't have all the information, the why, the where, the how that you really have to do when you're a journalist. But me, I don't really care, because I don't know I don't have the answer at the end. It's just that it's a nice moment, and I want to share that moment with the people who's going to read the books, and they can understand themselves that it's probably for a good fortune that they have the staircase like that. But I don't have to bring the answer. For me, it's not so important. That's what I like about comics too. So for the last book, for my last book, who's coming out last week, who was translated in English, we were sent away to Jerusalem. So there was a big change for me, because I was in a lot of countries in Asia. I really like Asia, but I thought that's going to be interesting to discover a new place. I've never been in the Middle East, and I didn't know much about the conflict, I have to admit. We known only 1 month before we left that we would go in Jerusalem, so that I didn't have to prepare. I don't think I would have had time to prepare anyhow, even if it would be longer with 2 small kids in the house. And I don't have much time for me at that time. And I knew that I would be there surrounded with people that on NGOs, and I've met, while I was there, journalists who lived there for 7-8 years. They were in the UN, in the humanitarian world, and journalists as well. So they had a lot of knowledge about the place, and it was very easy for me when I had a question to go to one of my friends and say, why is it like that and that? So I knew that I wouldn't have to go through all that. So being in Jerusalem, I work the same. We spend. I go in the house we've had, and this is my first day. Of course, we are waked up by the call of the prayer, and at first it's quite surprising, but you get used to it. Not so much the babies, though. Yeah, that's the problem. So I go around, and the way I work is kind of by circle. I look at the first thing I'm going to describe is the bookshelves that the people have left there. It's very funny because from the books you kind of tell, oh, this one is probably a kind of a romantic guy, or this one likes science fiction. So it was funny that that's the street I was. So I describe after that my street, and after that my area, and after that I'm going to talk about more of the Jerusalem where I was. I was in the east part. I was in the Arabic part of Jerusalem. 1 month before I left, of course, I looked at some pictures of Jerusalem in Google Image, and I thought, "Well, that looks good. It looks like a European city. It's going to be fun, cafes." And actually, when I arrived, I was not in that part of the Jerusalem. There's all sorts of area, but the Arab area is very run down. So I was kind of disappointed when I arrived there, and they're not all European. And especially when I was in the street and I was looking around, and they have these big garbage that they don't really take care there in that part of the city. And you have all sorts of cats who are on top of that, and they're like rats. They're very incredible. You don't want to pet them. They're just looks, and that remind me of when I was looking the 1950s cartoon where you have these cats who are in the alley and they eat. They have the fish bone, and actually it was taken from probably a situation like that where you have the cats living in the. We don't have that anymore, but in that area they still have that. So they're very terrifying. And if you can see, there's a little bag here, and at the end of and it's full of bread. I was very surprised in this area of the Jerusalem. For some reason, I thought, why don't they put it in the garbage? I'm always fascinated by small details like that, and I can think of that for a long time. And I was thinking, always I could see bags of bread sticking outside the can. I was thinking, why don't they just put it in there? And then at the end of my journey, we've had a tour with in Mea Sharim. Mea Sharim is the ultra-Orthodox area of Jerusalem. That's where you have the guys with all dressed in black. So I had a tour. It was fascinating. And then I saw there was actually pieces of bread in the wall of some houses that were staying outside. And I was thinking, why do they put that? She told me, oh, because the bread for the Jewish people is sacred. They don't put it in the garbage. And I thought, oh, well, they do exactly the same in the Arab neighborhood. I thought it was fantastic. And I was thinking, strange, because we Catholics, where we have the image of the bread as Jesus, so you would say this is the most sacred thing, we just throw the bread in the garbage like there's no problem. Choo, choo, choo. I thought it was strange. So I like to work with small details like that, and from the small details I'm going to try to give an image. Of course it's very subjective because that's the stuff I've seen, that's the experience I've had. I'm sure if I would go in Jerusalem tomorrow, it would be a very different experience, it would be a very different book. So that's the old city that I'm describing when I arrived there, and I thought it was Pyongyang on Sunday, but it's actually Jerusalem on Shabbat. There's no cars, there's no cafe, everything is closed. This reminds me of one of the trips I've done when I was there before. So I was very surprised as well. So Jerusalem can be a strange place as well. So I've described all the people I've met there, ultra-Orthodox people. I've been lucky enough to meet people in the desert, the Bedouins, and talk with them a little bit. The Samaritan, that's a fascinating community. There are only 500 people. So I've seen the Easter that they're celebrating them. And I talk about the small rencontre, well, meeting I have with people, and that's one of them. It's a very short one because that's on the that's the Shukot. That's a special holiday they have. It's very famous. They build these little cabana. You probably know about that. And so this guy is working on it, and I'm just passing by, and he's having these big leaves that he put on the roof. It's very nice. These little, I really like that thing. And he talks to me. I said, "Oh, sorry, I don't speak Hebrew. I'm very sorry. I thought it would be nice if I could." So, and he says, "Are you Jewish?" And I said, no, I'm not actually. And that's it. That was the end of the story. He didn't say nothing. I thought it was interesting. Instead of having a baby with a stroller, I did do some sketches. That was most of my the time I was there. I did brought with me work, but after a few months I realized that with the 2 kids and the school was closed at 1 o'clock, and on Saturday there was no school, so I was stuck with the kids most of the time, and I realized that I wouldn't have a lot of work for myself. So I decided after 2 months of struggling, okay, gonna stop just going crazy. I'm just gonna do a few hours here and there of sketches. I'm going to go outside and do sketches, and that's going to be kind of a sabbatic year, which was a very good decision, because after that, everything calmed down in the house and in my head as well. And I got to meet people. You go there, you sketch, people talk to you, see you, and it's like a stroller in Burma. You get to open doors with just your little sketchbook. It's a very good way to travel. People had told me that, but I've never tried it. So being in East Jerusalem, it's kind of special, because when you take the car and you go abroad, if you go north, east, or west, you end up to see the wall. So after a while, I started to draw the wall a few times here and there. And you can go with the car, you can go around the wall, and I was doing a lot of sketch, which was a lot of fun. And I was exploring. You're in front, you take the car, you go left and right. And then I sat there. There was all these blocks and concretes, and 3 minutes after, there's a car, the army car comes, and I had a very strange conversation with the soldier. He said, "What are you doing there?" I said, "I'm doing a drawing." He says, "A drawing? A drawing of what?" I said, "The wall." He said, "Well, why?" "Well, just like that." And he says, "Well, you can't stay here. You have to get. It's a military zone. You have to go." So I thought, well, it's too bad, because the beginning was good. That was the beginning of my drawing. I've never finished it, and this happened to me a few times. And so you get to meet people. Sometimes it's very short. Sometimes it's longer. I've had people inviting me in their house, and yeah, if you draw, I would very recommend to do that if you're traveling. And sometimes people tell me you are doing journalistic work, and I really don't feel like a journalist, because for me a journalist goes into a place and he has some work to do on a country, and he knows what he's going to work on, or more or less, and he knows, and if something hot happens, he's going to go there, try to see what's going on. But me, it's quite the opposite. I just walk around in the streets, and if a story comes to me, I'm going to take notes, and then I'm going to do something with that. But otherwise, I'm not going to do a book, because I don't have to do a book. We've been in Ethiopia like that. I didn't mention that, but we spent 1 year in Ethiopia, and I worked the whole year on Pyongyang, and it was great, because I've worked a lot, but then at the end I didn't have nothing to say about the country, so I didn't do a book. And so I go in Jerusalem, and if I do the opposite of a journalist. He goes to the story, and I kind of wait to the stories to come to me to do something with that, and that's it. And one example, when there was the Gaza, I was in Gaza in 2008, 2009, and there's been the Gaza war. Well, the cast led, I forgot the title, how they call that, but that was the 3rd of January, and while there was that attack on Gaza, I met my friend journalist, and he says, there's that place, if you want to come with us, where the journalist goes. There was a hill next to Gaza, and with big telescope they could see what was going on. And I said, and he told me, I'm going to go there tomorrow. You want to come with me? I said, oh yeah, that could be interesting. Yeah, sure. And yeah, okay, let's go. And then we go for a meeting for tomorrow. And we decide for a meeting for the next day. And then as I go home, I kind of try to imagine the situation where you're on that hill with all the people, and you have the F-16 who comes there and launch a bomb. Because that's what these journalists were looking after, some kind of explosion or action. And then you have stuff like that, and they all take pictures. And then I phoned him back. I said, "No, I don't want to go. I don't think I would feel comfortable to look at that." And so when people say you do journalism, that's why I was saying I really have the feeling that I do postcards, and I just talk about the stuff I've seen while I'm there. And if I have story to say, well, that's good. If I don't have, well, that's too bad. That's the way I work. I read my notes, and then I'm going to choose whatever is going to be interesting or not. And usually in the morning, I do the text, and then in the afternoon, I can do the drawing, more or less. So I do 1 page a day, yeah. I don't draw as fast as that, unfortunately. Yeah, that's a few hours. So by doing 1 page a day, it's good because I remember what I've done on Friday, on Thursday. So I'm in the position of being a kind of a slow reader who would turn 1 page a day. And that's very good because I get to have all the page in memory. And for the rhythm, it's great because I know, okay, I've talked about something more serious. Let's be more open in the next one and have some explanation later about that. And for me, the most important thing is the rhythm. So when I have someone who says to me, "Oh, I really like your book. I've had it yesterday night and I've read the whole thing in one night. It took me 4 hours." It's a good and a bad news at the same time because I said, "Oh, well, I did a good job because he turned the page and he read the whole thing." But, I've spent 2 years doing the book and he read it in 4 pages. So I kind of feel depressed at the same time. And so I take image, and for this one I had sketches, so it was different. And some of these sketches, I've used them for doing my work. I knew that I had that drawing, so I've actually worked on the cover to do that drawing. I knew I had it, so I just looked at my sketches. Same for that. That's actually, the Saint-Sépulcre. And instead of using a picture, I knew I had a sketch, so I went back to my sketches and I've used it like that. I take pictures as well, but sometimes it takes me too long to open the computer, look at all the pictures I have every year, and deciding where it is and finding it. So sometimes I just go on Google Image, actually. And on Jerusalem, you have so many pictures because you have all these people who've been in Jerusalem and they've taken pictures of everything. So you can find from the doorknob to any Muslim, Arabic, or Jewish thing. It's very easy. So I've worked with image, with my sketches, and that's how it goes for me. Yeah. I was thinking about going through a series of questions if you have, and while we do that, I can show you a few of the sketches I've done while I was there for the year, and this is going to be part of a book because now, to give you to give you the rest of my sketches. It's hard to read on that. Sorry. Anyhow. Here they are. Sorry. Boom. Okay. If anyone has a question about anything, yes, please.
I have 2 quick ones. One is, if you ever think about, did you write and draw
Yeah.
the connection of the writing of the hieroglyphics and pictograms, especially that you've been in all these Asian countries? That's one question. And the other question is, you mentioned how you do a lot of movement, you travel, and you don't really think of yourself as a journalist. So I was wondering if you had any connection to that great French word, splendor, which I don't think has a really good translation, but in terms of just, that kind of movement and seeing what happens on the
For the first part of the question, I've My drawing has changed because, like I was saying, I use a very greasy technique for China. But when I arrive in Pyongyang, where everything is gray and very straight and very, very clean, because everybody's painting the rocks and the house, and you don't have publicity, so there's not a lot of color. Everything was very pale gray and thin lines. So I've used more of a classic ink. Chinese ink and nib, and I was doing the shadow with something light as well, because I couldn't use the same technique. It was so different, and I kind of liked it. It was faster as well. And when I arrived in Burma, I've used more or less the same technique with a I did the shadow with the computer in a different way. So, and I kind of simplify my drawing. It became more graphic, and it's a balance for me now that is better, because my text became more simple as well. I just use very simple sentence, because in comic book you have to be so efficient that if you can use 3 sentences instead of 4, it's better to use 3, because you don't have that much space and you don't want to do 400 pages. This one is 300, that's enough. So I was always trying to concentrate stuff. So my texts are more simple, and my drawing are more simple as well. So I like that now, because there's a balance. So you take almost the same time to read the drawing than the text. So for me, it's good like that. I keep it like that. And for the traveling part, of course, I do a little bit of journalism in the book, but what I really prefer is just to go around. And you were talking about flâneur, which in English would be just walking around or taking your time to look at things. And that's really what you do when you do sketches, because you sit for 20 minutes somewhere instead of taking quickly a picture and going away. I remember someone was saying, don't go in I was in Naplouse, that's the north, in the West Bank, because I was lucky enough to be with the French Alliance, who sent me in a few places to do workshop with the Palestinians. That was very interesting. And they were saying in the morning, don't go in the old area of the town. There's a market, but it's not very safe to go. But it's the morning I went there. I didn't feel any threat at all. I sat there and I start to, I have that in the book, I start to draw, and I spent 20 minutes, and you have these guys who come behind me. I wonder what's going on. And then they started talking, they bring their friends, and then at the end, I spend half an hour with them, showing them my sketches, and we had tea together. So that was the whole story. And that's what happened, because when you do a sketch, you sit there and you're really showing to the people who are in that place that you really like it, and you want to take time to do something with that. So you really give them, a feeling of, you're sharing something with them. And that's very different, That's why I like to do sketches. And when you look at some sketches that you've done, like this one, I remember I was drinking a coffee in that place. There was the sun. This one I had a sunburn because I stayed too long. That was in Jordania. And maybe I want to go quickly on something more funny, which is really what I prefer to do, is like funny stories. But I have to explain sometimes more of the serious stuff. I was lucky enough to have to do exhibition of my work in the West Bank with the Alliance Française. So the way we worked is I would do an exhibition. If there would be enough people, I would do a presentation like this one. And if there would be enough people for the presentation, I would do a workshop. So I did 3 workshops, and when I was doing my first presentation, and it was in Naplouse, I wanted to show them. There was a bunch of students. It was an art school, student 18, 19, boys and girls. So I felt, very comfortable, and I always improvise just like I do tonight when I go through my files. And I wanted to show them that I come from animation, and this is my first book that I told you about, and this is the first story that I did. And I kind of forgot which one was the first story. I was a bit mixed up. And the story happened in the south of France. So you have girls with what they called monokini. So as I was passing this image in front of that class, I was thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't show that, because they're half-naked girls and these are Muslim people. But then I was not too sure. And as I was about at this part of the story, I was thinking, I don't know, maybe. And then I said, well, okay, they're students, they're art students, so I'm just going to continue. And then as I turned around, I saw half of the class they just moved away from the class. They just left the class. I felt very terrible. But before they left, I said, you can see the rest on my website. Because that's what I've been told. That's what they do publicly, because they are, I don't know, they have to show that they are very religious or something. So then I was kind of, and then half the class left, well, no, 1/3, and boys and girls. And I said, so what do we do? The director of the university was there. He said, no, let's keep going, because he wanted to show that, here we're not, we're like that. And everybody's saying, no, keep going. So I kept going, so I showed the rest of the story. I felt a bit bad, but then I thought there was an interesting experience in my 2 further workshop. I did the same, but I had different reactions. Yeah, I was a wild young man doing crazy stories at the time. And okay, I'm going to finish that story. That's a long one. So you see, it's like a short film, basically. So she get back with her first girlfriend, and that's it. And what happened is, then I went in Ramallah. Ramallah is very different, and I showed that in the book. Like, the West Bank is just one big block. It's actually different cities, and they're very different from one to the other. And in Ramallah, I showed that, and everybody laughed. There was no problem. Everybody's very cool. In Tel Aviv, it's kind of, not Tel Aviv, but Ramallah, it's kind of the Tel Aviv of the West Bank. And then I was in East Jerusalem at the university, and I had only girls. 10 girls were there. Some were veiled, so some were complete. One of them was completely veiled. You couldn't see her face. I said, well, I'm going to try. I showed them the story to see what happened. Interesting. They all laughed. No problem. Because I think they were just girls, so when they're together, it's no problem. But because they were boy and girls, I think they had to show that, oh, this is disrespectful. I'm leaving the room and all that. So I thought it was interesting. So I showed that in the book as well. Any further question? Yes.
When you're drawing, when you're like having people talk in other languages, how do you choose? Because you often draw like script, like Korean script or Chinese script or Hebrew.
Yeah.
How do you? I mean,
for the
Hebrew, like put the graphically interesting.
yeah.
How do you?
For the Jerusalem, I had a friend translating me the Hebrew, correcting me, and I had someone for the few Arab phrase I have, because I wanted to have it good. But for the Chinese one, I wrote just rubbish thing, and I had a Chinese friend who told me I can translate, but I said I don't even know what I want to say in that. I just want to say that he's talking to me, and I said no, I'm going to keep it like that. So if I have a Chinese person reading it, he's going to feel just like I felt. He's not going to understand. So for the Chinese, I didn't change. Yeah. But the way I work for the Jerusalem, if I have a lot of people that I mention in the book, and they're drawn, and you get to see them, and every time I had someone name, I was sending him the picture, the image, and so he could see the stuff. And then we work together with Michael, the priest that I've met, and we were talking together. Of course, yeah, he read that and he changed a few sentences. He was smoking, and he says, I would like you to remove the smoke because I'm not supposed to smoke next to the church or something. So that's why he's talking like that. He doesn't have any cigarette. It sounds strange, but I've removed it. So it's like a Photoshop censor of the, like the Russian used to do. Any other questions? Yes. Well, from the Jerusalem one, yeah, I got reactions from the Burmese. Well, different ones. Well, let's start with North Korea. Not directly, but I had people who were still going there to do the work in North Korea, and it was translated in South Korea, so it was in Korean. And I know that the people have seen the book, or they know that the book exists, and they weren't happy about that. That's what I had as information. But I can understand why they're not happy about that, because the director is not happy because I come back with a negative image of the country, and that's not good for him. I think I'm supposed to come back with a very good image of the paradise of the workers, but that's not what happened to me. And I guess the people that I was with are afraid that I'm going to put sentence in the book that they've told me that were kind of ambiguous about the regime, and I really understand what they meant, but I didn't put them in the book. Right at the beginning of the book, I said, even though my questions were sometimes, twisted, they've always been very faithful to the dear leader and their country, and which is true. But sometimes they told me a few things that, in the situation, said, "Aha, yeah, he knows what's going on outside," and if one day, but I didn't put that in the book, which I'm glad. Yeah, of course, because that's dangerous for them. But I know they're still there, they're working, and they didn't have any problem with the book. In Burma, it was different because I've kept contact, and the people that were there, it was different. I changed their name and their face because I didn't want them to be recognizable. That's why it's a bit blurry in Burma, because you don't recognize a face, because I keep changing them. I keep changing the name as well. I was afraid it could be dangerous for them. For the Jerusalem one, in Burma once I was in Paris and I got a Burmese lady. She was a young student and she couldn't come back to her country for some reason. And she said she really liked the book because for once I was showing Burma everyday life, and I was showing that Rangoon is a nice city, and we were not talking for once about Burma being a dictator and all that. So for her it was a good change. On the Jerusalem book, I had a lot of reaction. It's just coming out in English now, but in French I got a lot of good reaction and a few bad ones about the way I see Israel, of course. But I got great reviews in the Canadian Jewish review, it's called, and friends who are there as well. So yeah, basically good reviews, yeah, from both sides, I have to say. Yes.
Can you make those, I was wondering, you make that into a screenplay, make those into a feature film?
Well, I think because I come from animation and I know what kind of job it represents, I don't really dream about doing it. Like I know a lot of cartoonists who have done cartoon all their life, and they're just dreaming about doing movies. If anyone wanted to do an animation film with any of these books, which it almost happened one with Pyongyang, I said I don't want to have anything to do with that. Yeah, and I think it's a bad idea. I told her I think it's a bad idea. It's a good book, but it's going to be a terrible film because it's meant to be a book. Really, I have games in that. I have all sorts of things that doesn't translate in movement in animation. So yeah, no, I don't fantasize. I'm not one of these comic book author that lives in the hope that someday they're going to be a director and they're going to do animation. Oh no, I much prefer to. I remember Marjane Satrapi, who did Persepolis, was a very good film. She stopped and she spent 3 years doing that, 3 years of her life going around promoting the film, making the film. I much prefer taking 3 years and do one and even two different books than going back to an old one and make a movie out of that. No, I don't have any fantasies on that side. Yes.
Going to any of these countries, do you have any certain expectations? Do you have any surprises, expectations you have?
Well, I try not, but you always have, even though it's like if you would go in North Korea, I try to not fight, but I have expectation or image in North Korea. I was thinking, well, maybe if I go in North Korea, I'm going to discover that these guys are very proud and they really have the feeling that they're fighting against something, and they have, they have something in common that's very strong. But the feeling I had being there, it's actually they're just trying to survive, and I feel very sorry for them. So I always go thinking, well, maybe it's going to be very different from what I thought. But, you always have an image of the place somehow. Because I arrived in Jerusalem, I had that image. And I think that's like that for anybody who has been in a different country, being an expat. That the first month, you kind of fight against the image you had. And it takes a month, and then you can kind of have a white page and start from what you have in front of you and what you can do, and then see what's going to be the year or the few years in front of you. But the first months are very hard because you think, I don't have that, and this is not what like I've seen, and what am I going to do? And you're just puzzled. That's what happened to me every time I go in any of these countries. But I think it's a natural reaction. Yeah.
So last question.
Yes. No, no, I'm not a religious person, and being in Jerusalem is not going to make me a more religious person. I think in Burma I had something not religious, but I was with the Buddhists, and I've spent a few 4 days do meditation with the type of meditation they have there. It's not religious; it's more meditative. But it was a very kind of religious experience, closer to what I've ever experienced in Jerusalem. But it's a very different country and situation. Of course, it's not. We can compare both. But I didn't have the Jerusalem syndrome, yeah, that's for sure.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thanks. I don't know if did you...
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget that you can check out this and all of our other great podcasts at www.skylightbooks.com. Today's music was provided by Fragile Gang. You can check them out at MySpace, Facebook, and the iTunes Music Store. Thanks for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.